Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is March 1, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Michael Dishler for part two. Michael, where in the heck you calling in from?
Wyncote, PA, a little suburb of Philadelphia. Once inhabited for a short time by Ezra Pound.
Ooh, there you go. What a way to start us off. I'm really excited about this. And in our first part, I didn't go into this and I skip this question often, but I thought it would be a good jumping off point. It's a McLuhan line, and bringing up Pound, McLuhan used to hang out with Pound in his hospital at the end of his life. He was visiting him. And McLuhan learned a lot from Pound. And this is a quote from McLuhan, which I'm going to interpret how I think it means, what I think it means, which could be inaccurate. And then I would like to know what you think it means or what it spurs in you. Everybody experiences far more than they understand. Yet it is experience rather than understanding that influences behavior. So I'm thinking he's sort of distinguishing between experience and understanding. And experience is the kid comes in from the cold and the parent goes, "Don't touch the stove, it'll burn your hand." That's experience. Understanding is, let me teach you the dynamics of heat. You can get really close to the stove and rub your hands together and get your hands warm. And that is understanding. And Marshall, I think, is kind of saying understanding should shape our behavior, but experience more so shapes our behavior. If you want me to read the quote, I will again, but otherwise you can just jump.
I got the gist of it.
Okay, good.
The first thing I thought of is that the problem with us humans is that our experiences are filtered through our current understandings. So I think many of us have a tendency to misinterpret our experiences or not get the lesson or the understanding that is being provided because our prior understanding is like a filter for what the experience is. I mean, it's really difficult to have an unfiltered experience, to have something happens and you don't put a meaning on it based on your preconceptions. So
That's really good, Michael. I think you nailed it because it flushed it out a bigger picture. Mine was sort of narrowed with reality tunnels because I keep repeating it over and over. And I did exactly what you described because T.S. Eliot said they had the experience but missed the meaning. Is that kind of what you're saying?
yes, I think that's a chronic issue with myself and others.
Yeah.
There's a little pun in Finnegan's Wake: missed understandings.
That's good. Thank you, Michael. It's good to be back here. And then the other thing I found in reviewing part one was your attraction to intellectual humor, and the other thing was knowing within. Like to know yourself was the first thing. Getting a little deeper. What I call is the hidden psychic effects, like the hidden things we don't understand, and that's exactly what McLuhan was learning from Pound, is that you needle the subnabulism that your inventions put you into. So we grew up with TV we grew up with electricity. We don't know how electricity and TV really shaped our behavior because that's all we knew. We came up in part one. It's like fish swimming in water. They don't know what it is until you take them out of it. We've never been taken out of the world of cars or electricity or even spoken word and printed word. So when we invent something, we extend our humanness. So knife and fork extends your teeth. The shutter in a camera extends your eyelid, or or a projector. You maybe even non-tangible, say philosophy or religion, might extend consciousness. So let's take two of your main tools in your life. One was the needle in acupuncture. That is an invention, right? That is like, it's like biomimicry. It's like I have a lemon tree out here and the thorns on it are as long as a acupuncture needle. I mean, they are large thorns. So, I mean, we kind of saw these thorns and says, oh, we can make a needle. So what does the needle in acupuncture extend? Acupuncture. What does it extend for you? What humanness?
What humanness?
Yeah. So
what human capability, kind of what human ability.
Well, it's like McLuhan called it a human sensorium, but I call it humanness because it doesn't have to be tangible like an exact thing. Because, like I said, a knife and fork extends our teeth, but maybe religion or philosophy, which we invented, extends consciousness, which you can't like hold in your hand. So it's wide open what I'm asking for. What does it extend?
Well, it extends your ability to connect with, in that case, your patient.
Yeah.
Because what acupuncture is accessing their life energy. The Chinese call it Qi, CHI.
Yeah.
So the whole point of acupuncture is to adjust, balance, influence someone's Qi. And it's not really to produce, it's ideally to set things right. You're just letting the energy find the level it wants to. You're addressing blockages, excesses, deficiencies. So you're not trying to change the person. You're trying to allow them to be more fully their best self. And the needle, I mean, sort of literally, the concept is that energy is a little bit beneath the surface of the skin. It is on the surface, but the points where they really are is a little bit beneath the surface. Could be an eighth of an inch, could be an inch and a half. Most of the time in what I do, the needle is about a half inch, give or take, in depth that you're going in. So the needle is a way to extend your ability to reach that energy. But ultimately, it's only an extension of you, of the practitioner. For example, if I gave you a needle, and said, here's the point right there, put it in this far and do this, I think it would probably be different than if I did that.
Why?
Because understanding intention is part of it too, even though it's a needle.
Your intention is different than me.
My understanding and my intention would be different than you in that case.
Yeah. That's really good. Michael, you covered a lot there. Let's go to the other tool that we're kind of talking about before we hit the start broadcast button today is the pen. So Joyce was writing Ulysses with a pen or a pencil, right? And you actually got to hold the paper of the script of the manuscript of Joyce because it's stored there in Philly. So what do you think the pen or pencil the writing utensil, even if it's a keyboard, extends for the human being. Because you write, Joyce wrote, it's an amazing tool that we invented. What humanness does the writing utensil extend?
Well, I was reading something where this guy was talking about Finnegan's Wake, and he was saying it's almost like a book written makes the author immortal. It
Yeah,
extends your life in a
it
sense.
does.
It
Yes.
extends your influence, your life. Um, I mean, and aside from that aspect, which is a big aspect because it allows for the transmission of, art, but other things besides art, pragmatic things that it's it's good to have a certain permanence, a certain. I mean, the other thing writing tends to do is it sort of materializes thought and in a way confines it or focuses it. Um, so it specifies it, crystallizes. It sort of like crystallizes thought and makes it somewhat more permanent and much less ephemeral than thought itself, and much more stable. It
Stable.
stabilizes thought.
There's a lot of great verbs there: confines, crystallize, stabilize, but in materialize. But it's funny because thought is always in flux. So then we're sort of screwed. Like a person who was a literate person who hung out, my friend, she just passed away, Mary Jane Schultz. She invented the word from studying with McLuhan and Mailer and Ivan Illich. It's called splitteracy. So what it is that literacy splits the left and right hemisphere. And she would spell it with a S with a dollar sign. So it does. I mean, how could we have had this discussion pre words? Like, and especially pre-printed word, spoken word, could we have had this kind of discussion? Could humans communicate without spoken and printed word?
Yeah. Um, I mean, that the first thing that came to mind with that is, I have this belief in evolution in the sense that most things that develop are for the sake of improving survival.
Yeah,
So it probably, it makes it much, more efficient to survive if we can communicate with each other. And you can sort of.
yeah,
So that was probably the first thing, and then how it becomes this. I don't know if I mean, I'm saying this whimsically, but I don't know if God was thinking of poetry and fiction when he when the ability of language kind of evolved. I mean, maybe he was, but initially it was probably like, hey, if we're going to hunt, if you tell me, hey, last time I caught a such and such over there, it's an advantage. And if you can tell me it's about 200 steps towards there, it's advantage for the hunt. But
that is good.
so it definitely, and then of course that all, inventing, building things, all that, it
Yeah.
that too. Where poetry and fiction and all that came in is an interesting thought.
Yeah, I know. I want to get into music and all that and art, but I wanted to ask you in regards to art. Mike Kelly said art is making your problems other people's problems.
Huh.
Any comment on that?
I mean, that is well, if your problems have a kind of universal appeal or an appeal to many people, other than the more general the appeal can be, maybe the more popular your art will be. If
Yeah.
your problems only are very, very specific to you, you might not get too much traction as an artist. If you somehow make people think, oh yeah, that guy's talking about what I'm feeling, then you tend to get a lot of traction.
Well, you brought up Woody Allen a couple times in part one, and I thought that was applicable. But here's a poet, Fanny Howe. And again, I'm just curious your reaction to her comment. The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't.
um, Let me think. Uh, that's I mean that one doesn't exactly resonate with me. I could come up with something. That one doesn't resonate with me so much. I think I'll take a pass on that one.
But it's interesting because of those two, usually it is people can comment on the Mike Kelly, but the second one I'm still trying to figure out. So that was good.
Okay.
Now, I talked with Michael Apted 40 years ago, the movie director, and I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it really flourished in the 80s with MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. What Michael Apted said to me is because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Well, I'm not so sure that's such a great thing, because there's a lot of people who believe the increased prevalence of things like ADD, attention deficit disorder, with kids comes from looking at their phone all the time, and their attention span is about 3.5 seconds, and so I don't know if that's such a great thing. Um, I mean, the fast processing faster. Where does that almost in a way sort of seems to take people away from themselves? I wouldn't. To me, that's not such a positive thing.
Yeah, because we way back we had one person told me, well, we had Evelyn Wood reading, speed reading, and
I took it.
it taught us how to speed read.
Yeah.
But the hidden question, really, Michael, is it literally possible to multitask?
Well, yes and no, but to what? Yes, maybe, but to what end? I mean, will you might apparently accomplish more, but will you enjoy and appreciate your existence and experience life more or
Yeah.
less? Probably less. You know, I could bring in one of my more powerful feelings about Joyce in this. It's
Oh,
kind
please do. I
of
welcome.
apropos.
Please.
Well, in Portrait of the Artist, he put forth this theory of art, of what art is. And one component of that, he used this term, it has the ability to arrest your attention, as in stop it, as in make it stop. It's sort of like if you look at a beautiful painting or hear beautiful music or whatever, it's sort of what Joyce is talking about is shutting down that part of the mind that's going here and there quickly, and
Yeah.
sort of bringing you into the present. And he even makes this distinction. He calls it that kind of art versus what he calls pornographic art. And by pornographic, he doesn't mean sexual or obscene. What he defines what he means, which is art that sort of encourages action. Like, I mean, in the example of pornography, when you watch pornography, it makes you want to go have sex, or
Right.
even watching, you know, a fast-paced car chase, or
Yeah.
it gets you going, kind of. And he calls, I guess, a kinetic would be another. I think he might have used that word too. That's kind of like kinetic I'm not sure if that was his word or mine, but it's kind of art that produces a kinetic feeling. But his idea of art was by its harmony, by its beauty, by the composition of everything at working together as a whole, by the relationship of each piece to the whole, it arrests your attention. It stops. It stops that racing, and
So it's arresting art versus pornographic art. Those are the two kind of
yes,
titles.
yes,
Well, that is amazing. So he
you
literally,
have to sort of define pornographic. That it
yeah,
means, inspired to action, not
yeah,
necessarily obscene or sexual.
yeah. Well, there's a couple things I want to react to just that because stopping time. This is Chris Marker, the great French filmmaker. He's like, can we stop? Can we forget about time? Can we stop time? When me or you are in the midst of reading The Wake with a group, it's sort of like time goes away, or you're caught up in the middle of a music listening to music, you can lose track of time, or a good film. This is the ability. I think that's the arresting art that Joyce is talking about. This is in the portrait, yeah. But here's two reactions. Um, is Auden, the poet, said the mystery of art is we don't know it if it activates or pacifies us. So if you're like Billie Eilish, learned how sex from watching violent porn. Her mom didn't even know this until she revealed it on Howard Stern, and she's like, "What?" And so she was just
That's
she was
pornographic art, by the way.
right, and did she have to see a therapist to get rid of that? I was like, wow, wait, but I mean, that's just, we don't know if that activates or pacifies. It's like if you're
passive, who would that pacify?
well, but that is the mystery of art. Is okay. Let's go to violence. If you watch, I don't like Clint
She said
Eastwood.
she was a porn addict, by the way. She was addicted to that stuff.
Well, I mean, this
Anyway,
is, yeah, but yeah, maybe I shouldn't say it that
that was
extreme.
just an aside, but
She learned about it.
yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, I grew up in an era where kids like Clint Eastwood and James Bond. I never got into them. And then I fell into that trap of the 70s films of Scorsese and appreciate them, but I don't want to watch films with blood, guns, or knives. I don't want that. We just turn them off. We don't like that. Even watching all those Woody Allens and a couple of those films that he was acting like a mob, bumping people up, and I cringed. So does watching violent films alleviate you of the tendency to be violent or cause you to go be violent? So does, kids who grew up on video games, violent video games, does that make them go to Langley, Virginia and bump off people in other country with a joystick, or does it alleviate them? We don't know for sure. We can do all the testing and survey and have all the intuitive thought that I know that this caused it or didn't cause it. But I think Auden nailed it. He says that is the mystery of art. In fact, it goes to Bertolt Brecht, who said, I don't want art that puts me in a trance. I want art that activates me and stimulates me. Now, that is like, well, if you go to a Grateful Dead show and it puts you in a trance, in the long run, that might activate you to do something positive. But are you just vegging out like, what happened to the Dead, and it just became an excuse for kids to drink beer and get high, So, I mean, there's the same thing that I think Auden sort of nails it. We don't know for sure what it does.
Yeah. Well, I think you understand, but the arresting idea, that's not synonymous with trance at
Yeah,
all.
right.
That's like being in the present alert. So
Yeah.
they're not synonymous.
No, to be present and alert. I
That's what he means by resting, I think.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not saying
Not in a trance. I mean, I don't know if I needed to say that, but I just wanted to
no,
clarify.
I'm glad you did that because I'm not trying to clarify what you said. I agree with your distinction of what Joyce taught us in portrait. I just was taking it one step further. Like, do we really know which art does that and which art doesn't do that?
Well, I mean, my short answer is it activate if a violent movie. I could watch 100 violent movies, and I'm not going to go out and shoot somebody.
Yeah,
You could, another person could watch one and then go out and shoot somebody. So I think it's all what's latent in the person. It can, if there's something within them to connect with what they're seeing, it can activate something that's already there.
yes,
It can create something that's not there. And
yeah,
one I'm kind of circling back a little bit to that thing that you said about art art shows. What was the one that I declined to answer back a
that
few?
is Fannie Howe said the point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't.
Oh, yeah, here's one thought I had about that. Like, what I like about Joyce and other authors of his ilk, of which aren't many, but I always felt in Joyce, he presented the whole panorama,
Yeah,
but he never made a judgment about it. He never said this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong. He just presented it almost like he was, the what, the old Bob Dylan. He knows too much to argue or to judge.
yeah.
It's kind of like that. Those who really know don't argue and don't judge. And that's the kind of art, like if art has a conclusion in it, the conclusion is life is sad, life sucks, life's frustrating, you never get what you want, life is empty, all
Yeah.
those things. I don't think that's even the greatest art. And by seeing it like that, then if that's what she meant, that art shows you the limitations of life, and then you want to live. I think the art I'm really attracted to is the one that doesn't have judgment built into it.
Is that there's one word. Is that timeless? Would you call it timeless?
Um, yeah, I mean, I wasn't thinking that, but that kind of gives it a timeless quality, because if you make a judgment, you're limiting it to a
Yeah.
time and a place and a conclusion. If you don't have a conclusion, that tends to take it out of its time and place.
Well, how about this one, Michael? This is what McLuhan learned from Finnegan's Wake and all of Joyce: suspended judgment. He said, understanding is not having a point of view. It's like when you're talking with one or more people, you try to do like Pascal, understand this end of the spectrum and that, and everything in between, the big picture. But when you're in your lonely teenage room by yourself, you can go, I love cell phones or I hate cell phones. You can have a point of view, but to have that bigger picture, the panorama you talked about, that's what McLuhan learned from Joyce. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, and I think you know, you see that in great films. I mean, that great films, great books, great art. It doesn't prescribe the conclusion. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
I think. I mean,
Well,
that's 90% of popular media does prescribe
yeah.
the conclusion, which makes it sort of predictable and trite.
Well,
But
that's the other. McLuhan said, in order to get me, you have to know all of Joyce and the symbolist. And Mallarmé said, to define is to kill, to suggest is to create.
yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so now let's go into this word archive. This is funny because this be here now, live in the moment comes up. In 1400, the word came about keep safe, free from harm. 200 years later, it's what we think an archive is, a record preserved as evidence. So, we're both for museums and libraries, even though I love the futurists who said destroy all libraries and museums. I live in a library. I go to the library every day, but I want to suss out two points and thoughts with you is archiving more innate or more invented? And do you have plans for your own archive? So again, to suss it out and bring it to the be here now, Ram Dass, the Eastern philosophy is live in the moment. In fact, Wyndham Lewis, the sort of anti-Joyce in the Wake, said artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. So we know right now I'm very present and you are very present, especially because Zoom has isolated our faces and we're just getting our face and our vocal input and output. And this idea, why, the Egyptians put stuff in their coffin with them. Why would we want to save stuff if the whole point is to live in the moment?
Well, I mean, I was just, I saw a few minutes of Navalny's funeral today.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, well, it's like it's a very human thing to sort of honor the past in that sense. It's sort of like by honoring the past, it can add meaning to the present. So, I mean, that would be one way I would think of archiving. It's kind of like honoring the past. I mean, a lot of, like Judaism has all these very beautifully written prayers about talking about someone who's deceased, and it's honoring them in a deep way, honoring their life in a deep way. And I think that's that honoring that kind of honoring enriches the present. But just collecting, archiving, that can be tedious and dusty, but honoring the past can be a good thing.
It's really good because you holding these actual pages that were in Joyce's hand is, like you said, it brought a tear to your eyes. That's amazing that you can actually do that they didn't go, you got to wear gloves here, dude.
Yeah.
But is this need or want to archive more innate and more invented in humans?
I just want to say one more thing about the holding the page.
Sure.
The very, very cool thing about that, there were two things. I felt like it was like a living seance. I felt like Joyce was in the room with me because I could see him writing the pages, and B, this kind of you might say a little narcissistic thought, but I had this feeling like right now I'm maybe the closest person on the planet to Joyce.
Yeah.
But anyway, he wrote the manuscript because he heard about them being sold. It wasn't like a great, outpouring of his art. He actually wrote it for the purpose of being sold, for the purpose of selling it. And he was pissed off at the agent who sold it at the auction because he felt like it got too low a price. He was angry about that. And he wrote a few limericks, and he took time to mock this guy Rosenbach, the guy who bought it. Joyce, personally mocked him a few times. But anyway,
but Joyce was making money. That reminds me of this great line. I'm trying to find it, but it's basically Sam Johnson said, don't fool yourself. All writers write. Oh, here it is, I think. Oh no, it's like all writers write for money, period. And it's like people want to romanticize why Joyce wrote. and it's a muse, or he was trying to change the world, or preserve his own legacy, or why does anyone create art? But in the long run, they're saying, well, we're selling their manuscript, what do you think? And he's like, well,
yeah, I mean, I didn't even necessarily mean that comment to apply to his art or writing in general, but that manuscript specifically, I knew it was mostly he did it hoping to earn a lot of money from selling it. At least that's
right. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
But I'm saying I don't know if that applies to all of his art, but I know
right.
I'm kind of, in a certain sense, it's a counterpoint to me having this, this amazing experience. It's a little bit of a counterpoint to that.
Exactly.
For me, it was this holy experience, but there's a sort of counterpoint to my holy experience.
Yeah.
Which was
again, it's doing what we're talking about. It's getting the big picture. It's like there's many elements here. It's like simplex. It's simple and complex. There's many layers to this whole thing, this whole discussion.
If there was an important point I digressed from, I totally digressed from what you said. So I don't know if you want to retrace that or go.
Oh, well, if you don't remember, I
don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, it will probably pop back because, what I was going to was, is this need or want to archive more innate or more invented? That's what I was wondering your thought on that.
Well, I think what I said about, the value of memory and all of honoring the past and all that, I think I pretty much answered that.
But you're saying that's innate in us, or did we invent that?
Well, if I think honoring the past is innate. I mean,
is innate, yeah.
I mean, like funerals, even in like Vico's thing, like that's considered one of the developmental aspects of humans when they first started honoring their dead and commemorating their dead.
Right.
So I think that's a significant aspect of civilization. But by archiving, I don't know if that's the same as, every issue of Time magazine on microfilm. It's not the same as honoring, your ancestors. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by archiving.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that's back to Mallarmé says everything ends up in a book. We can I can dumpster dive books that are 100, 120 years old. I can dumpster dive what's called thumb drives, and in 10 years they may be obsolete and there won't even be a machine that can read it. But I can always read that book. I found a copy of Emerson's Prayers, leather bound, in a garbage can. Then I went home and just Googled it. And so it's worth $3,000. Like, so what? I don't know if I'd ever get $3,000. I'm not looking for that. But the fact that it's almost like that piece of paper with that ink on that paper still exists and it's still readable. Can
I get up and show you something? I want to show
you. Sure. Yes.
Show and tell. I'll be right back.
I didn't know that about the Emerson.
Yeah.
Where is it? Did you talk to Derek about it?
Not yet. I'm going to. Yeah, I'm going to. I showed it to you. I'll show it to you. Yeah.
I didn't find these at a dumpster. I found them, on a virtual dumpster called eBay. But these were the 2 times James Joyce was on the cover of Time.
Oh yeah, how much you pay for that?
And this was when Ulysses was legalized in America in the 1930s, and this was when Finnegan's Wake was published in 39.
What'd you pay about approximately?
Not that much, like $20.
Wow, very good.
I mean, it was about 10, I don't know how many years ago, many years ago. 10 or 15 years ago, but they were like, 15 to 25, something in that. There might be more now. I don't know.
Okay, well, that's perfect lead in, Michael. You have some archive, you have
Yeah.
your own notes, your books. Do you have any plan, or is just like when you die, your family or friends are going to say, like, deal with it? What plans do you have, if any?
I have been, I have I have this hobby of Joyce. I have this hobby of music. So I have a great deal of music and a great deal of Joyce literature, book, not just his books, but a great many books about Joyce.
Yeah.
It's good that you mentioned that, because the answer is no, I don't. But I should.
But you should, yeah.
Yes.
You should, because you should go to that museum and say, the Rosenbach, and say, hey, when I die, will you take my archive, my Joyce archive? Because it will go into a dumpster. And this is like something that is important in the long run, because we can feel that this is a learning experience, by investigating the past.
That's interesting. Yes, I have a feeling they would appreciate these two-time magazines.
Exactly. But books, a lot of archives go, nope, we won't take books, because anyways, I've studied this. We're doing a whole movie on archiving, and especially when it goes all digital. Here's the digital twist. Oh, I've digitized it. Oh, well, where is it stored? Oh, it's stored on a hard drive. Well, a hard drive you have to replace every 10 years, and you have to test it every year. Most people who have stuff stored on hard drives don't even know that and don't think they have to. So then it disappears, and the book.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I also have a first edition of Finnegan's Wake, but it's a first American edition as opposed to the English one. So that was like $200 10, 15 years ago.
Well, I bought at a garage sale for $5 a copy of Ulysses that was sold illegally in America. Oh. And it's got penis enlargement ads in the back of the book. I'm serious. This is
like pornography. It was like, underground. Yeah. It was like when we were a kid, when I was a kid, Tropic of Cancer was kind of like in
right.
So, yes.
Or how about this? Do you have any 8-pagers, Tijuana Bibles?
No.
Do you know what they are?
No, I don't actually.
Okay, well, Google it later. Okay, let's move on, Michael. This is fun. What is the motive of the cave artist? Your guess or your hunch? What was the motive of the cave artist?
I think it's just that human. I mean, it's a kind of communication and archive. Cave art. It's kind of like maybe communicating to the cave contemporaries, but also it's leaving a record. We were here, and this was which is probably just. I mean, in a certain sense, that almost might sort of prove it's just a human thing, because I don't know what I mean, they, in terms, there was no like profit motivation or sell, no one was going to remember the artist. So there was no external motivation. It was just like an intrinsic thing, I would say.
Right. That's interesting. We don't know if they're like, hey, if you want to come into my cave and see my cave art, bring me an apple. I'm charging,
Or the cave woman, hey, cave, you want to come up and see my cave etchings?
It's like Tom Waits trying to attract a woman to his apartment. He goes, you want to come over to my place? I've got some smooth music. And she goes, you have any Stan Getz? He goes, no, I've got some Smothers Brothers.
My friend Richard's line was always to women, you want to come over and pose for a naked poem?
Okay, so what's more important, conviction or compromise?
I mean, the first thought was conviction, but compromise is important in getting along in life with others, playing with others. Um, it's that's an interesting thing because it's like conviction is for yourself, compromise is for other people, for you in relation to other people. Yeah.
That is really a good distinction. No one's ever said that. Convictions for self-compromise for others. That's good.
Yeah.
In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three things? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
I mean, there's a fourth one that I think is kind of more important than any of those three. But you want me to confine it to those three?
No. Tell me the fourth. Yeah.
Well, the fourth is it's kind of like perception. I was attracted to things of interest, things that would propel me forward, people, things. I always was my intuitive attractions are kind of most responsible for where I am. I could have used more ambition. Um, I would say that perception, skill, luck, ambition, in that order.
That's good. Now, see, let me just tell you what other people have added. They go, well, it's not those three. Purpose, a destiny, persistence, necessity. So I'm glad you've added another one, perception, because I got the question from, I used to ask, is ambition based more on fear or joy? 80% of people would say fear. So then I read William Friedkin, the director of Exorcist, and he says, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
That might also work for business in general.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I can't think of anything too clever or interesting with that. I mean, it's English.
What form? It's more so, Michael, metaphorically, what form is your inner consciousness in?
What form? Well, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by form, but I mean, it definitely is a dialogue in the sense that I am talking to myself. So it is someone talking to me or to someone else.
Yeah.
There's two people in there, sort of. There's a talker and a listener. Someone who's a projector and a receiver. It's a two-way thing often.
Yeah. No, that's good.
I don't know if it's good exactly because some of those conversations are a bit neurotic, but
yeah, but then you're putting a value judgment. Someone came along and invented mental illness, neurosis. Who invented this stuff? It could be shamanism. The person who was crazy in the town could be the town shaman, and then all of a sudden they invented mental illness. No, that's the town nut job. So we know there's societal norms and we want everybody to get along and not go and be harmful, but it is, anyways, one of the new readers of Finnegan's Wake said, was this guy like kind of schizophrenic? Because how could he's not staying focused here. He's sort of all over the place. And we're like, well, some people think, what's your opinion? Well, we're going to get into Joyce in a second a little more. But one thing, what's your opinion? Joyce was affected by having, what's the disease, syphilis, or was not? Because there's some Joycean scholars who go, well, that affected his sanity, and some people know it didn't affect his sanity. Do you have an inclination either way?
Mm, no, I don't have a strong. I mean, I've never. I thought I had heard a lot of the theories about Joyce, but I never heard that particular one. I mean, I'm not. I do know he had venereal disease. I mean, he would
Yeah,
have had to with his frequenting of the
yeah,
red light district in Dublin, at least then, if not other times. But um, you could. Let me think. What did I want to? I mean, it definitely affected his creation, and in some way the strain of guilt and maybe self-loathing that was in his writing. Um, I mean, I was just reading the thing I was going to tell you was at the Rosenbach. It turns out I just in December I found out about this Finnegan's Wake readings class that's happening. So that was kind of an answer to do it. Did I get all your resources? Well, I found out there's one happening, 30 minutes away that I can go to in person. So that kind of took up that need. But in that we were just covering the Shem the Penman chapter.
yeah,
And one thing that's so amusing and so interesting, the way Joyce completely pillories himself, as disgusting, gross, every just on the most personal level, how awful and polluted and dirty and disgusting he was. And as ambiguous as most things are in Finnegan's Wake, there, I, there can be no question that Shem the penman was James A. Joyce, and only, maybe in other places he was something else, but in that chapter, he's definitely James A. Joyce, no other.
wow,
So, well, because there's so many personal,
yeah,
things that only apply to Joyce.
yeah,
Um, that very specifically only apply to Joyce. I
yeah.
mean, he talks about Ulysses, he talks about chamber music, he talks about Dubliners portrait, all that. But anyway, so that I don't know. That might have been, and I think he had this guilt that maybe Lucia's condition was due to him having syphilis. Did you hear? Have you ever heard that? It's a
Well, it
little,
was that he watched her sort of wig out dancing in the living room, and that sort of inspired the Wake's free
but I
spirit.
mean, even on like some biological level, there was like she inherited.
Oh, she means she got nuts through his syphilis?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, okay. Well,
But
that
he
could
might have been sort of passed on something defective to.
pass. That could be too,
But
because
but yeah, I don't know if syphilis can lead to birth defects.
yeah,
Maybe it can.
yeah,
But the he did, but you can see a progression even between Portrait and Ulysses that he's getting more fragmented. You could say, if that's he's
yeah,
definitely getting more fragmented, and then Finnegan's Wake is even you know exponentially more fragmented. Even in Ulysses, the first half versus the second half. The first half is even relatively conventional, and then the second half gets more and more experimental. But the only thing, I mean, I did come across this. You could say, like in a way, Finnegan's Wake, Joyce wrote it to himself in a certain sense.
yeah,
He's the only person that could really fully understand it,
yeah,
assuming he does. If you and there is a thing about schizophrenics that sometimes they develop this whole coded language that's unique to them. So Joyce definitely had that aspect of his own language. But there was an interesting thing that came up in one of the New York Zoom reading things that I mentioned, which was Carl Jung saw Lucia once or twice, and his diagnosis was she's incurably schizophrenic. There's nothing he can really do for her, which of course did not make Joyce too happy. This is when she was still, in the institution. And the difference, Joyce, someone actually said something that was really beautiful. Like what Jung said, and what I was trying to convey was Joyce could choose to go there, whereas Lucia didn't have a choice. And someone summarized that in a really beautiful way. One of the people in the group said, Joyce dove, she sank.
Sank, yeah. That's really good. I've heard that before, and it's really a beautiful use of words.
Because you could see Joyce's letters from that time, correspondences. It wasn't like he went around, speaking and corresponding in Finnegan's Wakeys.
Yeah.
When he wrote a letter, it was quite normal for the, so it wasn't like it completely took over his brain. It was kind of like an intentional thing to write that way.
Yeah.
He would go around like some,
Mike,
artist talking like he wouldn't go around speaking
talking Finneganese, But we all talk Finneganese all the time.
Little jokes and little reference allusions, but we don't really talk like
but there are two little anecdotes. One is, someone in the New York Joyce meeting told my friend many, many years ago, 30 years ago, that Nora was pissed if Joyce went and saw mediums to read his mind, but she wasn't pissed if Joyce went and saw prostitutes. Which
I didn't know he went and saw mediums, and I didn't know
if you ever hear any, because I always wanted to find out which, some of those people have been in the Joyce Reading Club for many years. And then the other one was,
I could see him though. He was superstitious in some ways.
Yeah,
you could say.
yeah. And the other one was, this was a question I wanted to get into you. There's two more questions we're going to get back into Joyce, but I got to ask you this now. What percentage, it's a stupid question, but I've asked all the Joyceans, what percentage do you think Joyce got the wake, and what percentage do you think you get it? From 0 to 100, 100 being 100, you get it 100%. What do you think he got it? Just a guess, your intuitive, hunch.
Well, if you say he didn't get it, are you saying it was kind of like written through him or something?
Well, no, I'm just saying.
Not you, but what would him not getting it mean?
Well, it would mean he wrote a lot of it and he didn't necessarily get every little thing he wrote. He just put it in there, and it wasn't, he got, various Joyce scholars have said, well, Joyce got it 80% and I get it 60, or Joyce got it 90% and I get it 2%. I mean, just,
I'd like to meet the 60 guy. Between me and you, I think he's full of shit. But anyway. but anyway.
But what would you say? Just as stupid.
Okay, but I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
I think Joyce got it close to 100.
Right, close to 100. Yeah.
Joyce was an extremely intentional guy. He wasn't a whimsical guy. He didn't, I had this friend who didn't really know much about Joyce, and he thought, like the idea of stream of consciousness in Ulysses, he thought, well, that meant that's how Joyce wrote it.
That's how he wrote it.
No, he might spend an afternoon crafting one sentence of stream of consciousness. So, I think Finnegan's Wake, maybe 99.5, because
okay,
I don't think he didn't understand it. I think there were certain things he might have just put in that he wasn't exactly sure why am I pasting this in right now. But essentially, he totally understood it.
Now you,
Me,
Michael, how much do
okay.
you get?
See, I'm still at the early days of my excursion into Finnegan's Wake. Like I've only actually read about four of the chapters,
Yeah.
and I've studied as a whole a lot, books and all that. So, but as far as I'm maybe 20% in my own estimation of my study of Finnegan's Wake.
Right. But
And,
see, that's
and
what
that might sort of correspond to about what I think my understanding is.
right. But I think the fact that you have
But I don't think
dedicated
if I get to 100% of my study, I won't get to 100% understanding.
understanding, but I
Yeah.
think that the fact that you want to pursue it, you get it 100% because, or you get it in the 80% because you know it's worthy of your time. So that's the other thing that you would spend time. Okay, here's two questions that would jump into Joyce. They're connected. Two of my film heroes have this mantra: ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression, and Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, environments, and culture is dominant?
Um, I've never been that much of a creator in terms of art. So I don't know exactly how it feels to have a muse, whether the muse is your culture or the muse is your what's around you, or the muse is the classical idea of a muse, like something coming down to you. So I having not had a direct personal experience. I mean, I think most of art is more intentional and create. It's kind of like someone says, "Oh, how did that song come to you?" It's so. I mean, maybe for some people the song really did just come to them, but for a lot of people, well, it didn't come to me. I like worked at it for weeks.
Yeah.
So, or something came to me, but I had to craft it for weeks.
Yeah, you
So,
said it. The Joyce line is, oh, I got 12 words. And his friend said, you've been working on 12 words for a week? He goes, yeah, I'm trying to put them in the right order.
yeah. That was about you.
Okay, but now the real hidden question, Michael, is can art making be egoless?
Um, I mean, yes, you can get close to it, I would assume. I mean,
Yeah.
the other Joyce thing is, the artist stands there is like God, separate, sitting there paring his nails, sort of separate from his creation.
Yeah.
So in that sense, um, there's an egolessness of that he's just. I mean that part, that's all in portrait, by the way, all that, because Joyce really, I think, tells a lot there. I
Yeah.
mean, and there's a certain egoless quality in that, where you're no longer, you're detached from it.
Yeah.
But I don't think he totally ever achieved. It's hard for a human to ever achieve that
To
completely.
achieve it totally. But two
Yeah.
two people said, most people say, can art making be egoless? They go, no. And then one woman said, yeah, great art is egoless. And then another woman said, great art has to be egoless. So you when you reach this universality for people to understanding what you're putting out, and they're getting, like, you no longer own your art. Once you put it out there, people can do whatever they want with it. So here's the next question, and you touch on this: is perception reality?
Uh, no, I mean, no, it's not at all, because it's literally true. Everything we see is an illusion. Even sight is an illusion.
Yeah.
It's a trick between our retina and our brain. So it literally is. I mean, the retina gets certain impulses, and the brain configures them in a certain way that's useful for us. But so no, but I mean, as far as our experience as human beings, we behave as if it is, you know,
Good.
99% of the time.
Good. Because Lily Tomlin said, reality's just a collective hunch.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake, and he said it was like artists dream awake. He didn't want to be elitist, but he was saying everyone has this power to create these scenarios in the middle of the night in dream, but artists can also dream while they're awake. In fact, Jean Cocteau really nailed it. He says, it's a filmmaker's privilege to be able to show a large number of people to dream the same dreaming together, to show us, moreover, the optical illusions of unreality with the rigor of realism. And usually my question, has dreams played a role in your creative process?
You know, I always say I'm going to write down my dreams, but I never do.
Yeah.
I rarely do. I have had, I don't know if other people, I think maybe other people experience this, but they're dreams that just feel like dreams, and then there are dreams that feel significant.
Yeah.
They feel like it's a deeper thing. It's almost a more objective or deeper, or like, hey, that's trying to tell me something important. So those dreams, I think, bear more archiving and analysis, and I would maybe like them to inform my life or my art more, but I probably tend to let dreams come and go in reality.
Do you think dreaming played a role in Joyce's creative process?
Well, I think how yes, because I think he was trying to mimic a lot of aspects of how dreams operate in Finnegan's Wake, or components of dream. I
Yeah.
mean, one book that I find really interesting is Freud's book. I think it's called Dream Interpretation. It's kind of his
Yeah.
basic text on dreams, and you can see that there are a lot of devices that Freud identifies as components of dreams that are very clearly the same devices that Joyce uses in Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling he might have even read that or knew of it. So I don't know if he ever used the content. That would be interesting too. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody knows if Joyce ever used the content of his dreams, but he definitely used the devices of dreams.
It's a really good differentiation. That's super good. Now, what do you think Joyce meant by epiphanies and everydayness?
And after everydayness, did you
Yeah,
say?
epiphanies in everydayness. Yeah.
Oh. Well, to me, in one sense, that's similar or analogous to that idea of art arresting your attention. I mean,
Yeah.
epiphanies in everyday life are like moments that inspire awakeness, moments where you wake up.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that was a clear, that's always associated with Dubliners. I think that's an interesting tact. I mean, I think in a way that was probably more of a device of his youth, and Joyce saw, well, there's something even bigger than that. But epiphanies, yeah, I mean that can happen from kindness or amazing synchronicity, or yeah, I mean, what's something I value. I think, it's good if everyday life brings about epiphanies.
Very good. So back to Portrait. Here's a line from Portrait. I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cunning. So there's that whole thing. You're using your arms. That's an extension of your humanness, but he differentiates those devices as silence, exile, and cunning. What does that mean to you? What are those three words? How do they make you feel? Silence, exile, and cunning.
I think what came to mind initially was Joyce describing Stephen at that stage. That's a little passive aggressive. It's kind of passive aggressive. Silence, exile, and cunning. Or it's definitely disengaged. So I think that's kind of a trait of image of undeveloped, unfully developed youth, unfully developed art. A genius who hasn't really fully developed, because definitely, I could see that as the 21-year-old Joyce, because as a 21-year-old, you know, people, at that point, alienation's always a big thing. So that's coming from a person who's pretty alienated from everything in a way. And the alienation of youth. And then, because this is something I've really seen, that Ulysses is a big Bloom is a big counterpoint to the alienated, disengaged Stephen. I mean, Stephen's really still totally disengaged from life in Ulysses. It's all his intellect. He lives totally in his intellect. He doesn't really live in the world. Whereas Bloom is the opposite. I mean, Bloom has an intellect, but Bloom is very much in the day-to-day comings and goings of existence. In a certain sense, I almost feel like Stephen is the youthful Joyce, and Bloom is a little bit more of the middle-aged Joyce, or what Joyce started to learn. So I mostly think of that disengaged, alienated, intellectual person, but they're disengaged, alienated. I mean, if I'm going to use silence and cunning, it's kind of like there's kind of a fuck you in that to everyone else.
Yeah. Well, what about this line? Welcome, O life, to I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscious of my race. So I'm mainly curious what's the smithy of my soul means in the uncreated conscious of my life, of my race.
I've quoted that same line to friends of mine who aren't that into Joyce, to try to impress them. This Joyce was, pretty good. I also actually see that as like a 22-year-old guy speaking.
Yeah.
It's the over idealized version of youth, of an intelligent youth. I mean, it's kind of like, I used to hang out and smoke pot with my friends, and that feeling when you're 18 or 20 that you figured it all out, sort of.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of that. There's also that unseasoned youth, in that it's I have this massive perspective that's going to enlighten my race. So it's self-inflated, it's overinflated, which is another aspect of youth. So he's a bit overinflated there, and it's just kind of an overinflated idea. Through my
Yeah.
experience, my perception, I'm going to take that and cook that in my soul and create the wisdom or the understanding that my race is lacking. It's a pretty inflated. It's like a 22-year-old and was brilliant but still inflated, sort of.
Great, Michael. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Mm, I mean, when I think of that, I think of it as kind of a fault, not like for me. For me, it's kind of a fault, not a openness to life. The fault aspect of it is, I think of it as a kind of a magical thinking in that things are going to, things are going to change without me doing much.
Yeah.
That's what. So, in a certain sense, that's kind of impossible. I mean, the life is full of wonders. I don't have a problem with that if that's sort of what he's talking about. The wonders that are beyond your
Yeah.
understanding. That's a beautiful thing, but an impossible thing is like this is going to happen just because I wanted to or think it should, without me making effort for it to happen.
To happen. Really good. Well, again, this is a general question. Tell me one major element of your pursuit in being a thinker, an intellectual humorist, and a thinker, and a acupuncturist, and a joy scholar. One major element that's changed, and one major element that stayed the same. Just in your life's pursuit in general.
I think there was one thing that I came to realize that when you ask about those three things: ambition, skill, and luck. I've come to the understanding that a theme in my life that maybe has limited me has been a lack of ambition. So so maybe a change in that perception or understanding that in many things ambition is important, and it's not just ambition in the sense of getting ahead or stepping over somebody else. It's kind of like the energy of achieving, moving forward in whatever pursuit.
Yeah.
The yeah.
The way it feels like leading into the next question, and you could flush it out.
Of course, discovering that at 73 is a bit of a problem, but
well, but it does seem you're a happy dude in your yeah. And
I'm happy when a cheerful, interesting guy is making me the center of attention for an hour and a half.
I love the end of part 1. You goes, is there going to be 1 million viewers? And am I famous now? But here's Moshe Feldenkrais. You might know he works with healing and movement.
Yeah, Feldenkrais. Yeah.
He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, these personal questions, it's not that I don't want to reveal them. It reveals to me a lot of what I should have done more of. But I think I'm getting a bit in human relations, I tended to. It's sort of that idea of compromise and conviction.
Yeah.
I tended to weigh too heavily on the side of conviction and not heavily enough on compromise. And I'm kind of seeing that in order to kind of nurture relations,
Yeah.
sometimes seeing it how they see it, not so much how you see it, is necessary.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that.
Well, that's interesting because we brought that up with Duncan last night. And something he said, it was like, well, maybe that's how you got to that epiphany that you needed to work on the compromise by having that. You might not never have gotten to that if you were, all along compromising. So see, that's we're not sure about
Oh,
it.
I see what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Another interesting thing I just in this moment realized, which
Yeah.
I should write this down, or I should watch this myself later, that you can I'm just thinking you can compromise in that way without compromising the conviction.
Yeah.
One doesn't deplete the other. Like compromising for the sake of another person or getting along doesn't deplete your own conviction, which I think I kind of was operating under the principle that it did, maybe not consciously, but maybe that's why I was reluctant, because I
Yeah.
thought so that in fact it may even strengthen the conviction if you
That's
compromise.
That's Woody Allen made Marshall McLuhan change the wording, the emphasis on his question in one of the lines in Annie Hall. Marshall would ask it as a question. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong? That's a question. Woody had him say it as a statement. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong? So he exposes McLuhan to the world backwards. But again, that's another weird coincidence, because Marshall said a half a truth is still a lot of a truth. Okay, Michael, there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So I'm just curious your thoughts on this line. You create what you resist. I'm not saying you, Michael. One creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
I think there's a certain truth to that, in that, well, I mean, create, I would change that a little bit from create to run into.
Yeah.
You keep running into what you resist.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with that and have experienced that, because by resisting it, you created. If It's kind of like I have this neighbor friend, and I still have a landline in my house that I don't use much, but I don't get voicemail from it. And like 15 times I've told her, call me on my cell, because if you leave a voicemail on the landline, I won't get it. And like, she's an intelligent person, a PhD psychologist, but for some reason she had a really hard time with that. She would just keep leaving me messages on the landline and then wondering why I didn't call her back. And it was this thing that's like, why is she like that? What's wrong? So it's sort of like, by having that thought, I was creating that every time she would do that.
Exactly.
It was just like, oh, there's Doris again, leaving a message on the landline. I wouldn't have created, but so yeah, I created that because
It's amazing.
I wanted her to be different.
We do that.
Yeah.
In fact, it's like storytelling narrative. Hollis Frampton, filmmaker, says narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Um, narrative is. Tell me, read that the beginning of that one again.
Oh, it's like this. Narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. It's not really connected to the quote or to the question. The question is simply, can you forget to die? But it is interesting. Are we waiting to die? How much does death play, the idea of death play in our existence? So
Yeah.
the
So
question is difficult because people don't know if I mean it literally or metaphorically. So you can put it in the context you want.
I guess the quote sort of sounded like narrative was a distraction from
It
death, but
it is. That's what we're just making
yeah,
up stories. So we,
we don't have to think about that shit. But I mean, can you forget? Your question is, can you forget to die? Was that your question?
that's the question. It's not can you forget to, yeah, that you're going to die. It's can you forget to die?
I'm not. Let's see. I mean, I read this thing by Charles Bukowski. You know that guy? Is that his
Of
name?
course.
He said, like, he hates the going to funerals. He thinks they're ridiculous because most people already died like many years before their funeral. But
Yeah.
um, can you forget to die? I don't know what you mean exactly. I mean, I know what you said. It's not thinking about dying.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by forget to die?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, you could take it literally or metaphorically, but it's great. You said Bukowski's great because he's the most stolen bookstore author of all time.
You might not mind that. Somehow, I think he would like that.
Oh God, he would love that. Yeah, that guy is. But
Yeah.
it is funny because yeah, I was going to bring this up earlier. McLuhan said that advertising is sex, death, and technology. I say that's everything. Sex, death, and technology. Sex is feeling, intuition, hunch, emotion. Death is time. And technology is everything we put between us and another person, whether it's spoken word, printed word, cell phones, or landlines.
Can I go back to forget to die? It kind
Please, please.
I have a. I think I can make this relatively short. In one sense, that's my goal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what really being alive is forgetting to die. And the ultimate goal would be, just because that implies living. To me, the way I take that is that implies living to the end.
That's it. You got it. That is a really good answer, Michael. I love it. So how do you find peace of mind?
Um, well, I mean, I know it when I've gotten it, but I mean, peace. It's pretty clear to me, although I don't always perfectly live it. But I I have an internal practice that I do that gets me in touch with peace, and that's one component. And the other component is just living in a meaningful way. What is meaningful for me or productive for me.
Yeah.
When I'm living in a meaningful, productive way, and I do this internal practice, peace is there. And I can't really cheat on either. I can't not do one, or I have to do both. But when I do both, peace is there.
Is it a type, would you say it's kind of like a type of meditation or quieting?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what it sounds like. Okay, here's 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head, in just a couple words. 1, who started it all?
Adam and Eve. I don't know.
That's good. 2, are we going to make it?
Who knows? It's hard to say. Hard to say.
3, where do we put it?
I think we forgot. I think we forgot where it goes.
4, who's cleaning it up?
It all gets cleaned up, but the cleanup may not be on our terms. It all always gets cleaned up.
Yeah. 5, is it serious?
It's totally serious and it's totally inconsequential.
That's Zappa said, I'm very serious about being not serious.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more and we're out of here. This has been
Okay.
truly enlightening, Michael. I really appreciate your time. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Go to med school. But
Go to what?
med school.
Oh, go to med school. Dude, are you kidding? Don't you think you're, well, anyways, we'll get in there.
Okay.
Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over. Always over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
I think I'll decline that one.
They want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What smell?
What smell
Yeah,
of the glue in the binding? Well, there's sandalwood.
good. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Well, I guess the first, I'll go with the first thought on this one. I was going to say the Rosenbach Museum. At the
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, what do you want it made of?
Well, only what's coming to mind is marble, but that's what's coming to mind.
Good. First thought, best thought.
I'm thinking of David with his little penis.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good that I never had and never want. Well, that's kind of like a contradiction, because if I thought it was good, I'd want it. So let's see. Something good that I never had and I would never want. I can't quite think of that. Like I said, because good to me automatically implies I want it. I genuinely think it's good, huh?
The 3 answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin. Weird. Okay. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I've actually used that as a joke. I thought almost like you heard that from me. I used to have this joke. I feel like I'm standing in a pile of horse shit up to my neck, and someone are throwing bricks at my head.
That is amazing. It's rooted in. Yeah, I got it from an Altacocker on Venice Boardwalk. It goes way back. Yeah.
Well, that must be part of the collective Jewish unconsciousness. Then
it is.
We both assessed it. When you said Altacocker, I was assuming you meant Jewish. I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's an Altacocker. Yeah. He was an amazing guy.
So I got that from the collective unconscious. Well, I mean that's like the whole point. You can't do either. You're fucked either way.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Now you're making me think of these old Jewish jokes that
I got a really good one. I'm going to email you after.
Okay.
It's my favorite one.
Okay.
or one of my favorite ones.
Okay. Um, what's the cultural shift I feel good about? So,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think there is one really.
Okay.
I don't, nothing that great about culture these days.
What's a
I mean,
question?
it's not a shift. I mean, there's
Okay,
still, go ahead.
go ahead.
There's still a thing of preserving art, like,
Preserving art. Yeah.
but that's not really a shift. I mean,
Well,
it's
it's
almost, it's like almost, it's things are going the other direction, but there's still that's some of that's left. But,
hey, the Rosenbach's there. It's preserving. You're able to access it.
right.
That's a cultural. I mean, shift is all these are just words to be, played with. I'm not holding people. You've done really good. You were able to shift around the words if they weren't to your. But here's a couple last ones. Michael, tell me a question that remains unresolved for you.
How much was it me and how much was it fate?
Yeah. And how much fate? Because that's a question I've kind of asked in this. Are we watching it happen or are we making it happen?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, this one is two-part. How has acupuncture for your 4 decades shaped your behavior? And how has your study of Joyce or your appreciation of Joyce shaped your behavior?
I mean, acupuncture is like it's like a perspective on living. So it can be. So it kind of gives you certain guidelines as to what a healthy, balanced life is, which you can apply or not apply to the extent that. So it's provided guidelines.
Yeah.
Um, um, Joyce is, those big questions of, Joyce has shaped me. Those big questions about art and the purpose of art.
Yeah.
Joyce is right there in the middle of that for me. I mean, it's interesting because Joyce just speaks to a deeper part of me.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if there's a purpose to that or not. It just is, I mean, it's cool to have found that, but it does provide a certain center, a certain anchor in a positive way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, it's a cool thing that Joyceans have. How many people in life find something that's inexhaustible?
Exactly.
So that's a great thing, actually.
You ever read John Gordon's Summary of Finnegan's Wake or go to
Parts of it, yeah, parts
Yeah.
of it. I always
When
thought it was a little nuts, but it's good, yeah.
I've interviewed him with all these same questions. When I asked him this, it was very interesting because he said he didn't say exactly these words, but he says it's the camaraderie or the friends I've met. So you find these people like that New York Wake group is just a hoot. They are such an amazing group.
Yeah.
And it's like you find this camaraderie and they're all like, kind of razzing each other at certain times, but then we're pursuing something that's unpursuable, but we're not going to give up, and we're going to have fun doing it. And it's both academic and playful, it's both poo-poo caca and, World Book Encyclopedia.
Well, it is true that in Finnegan's Wake, there's group, among people that are really into Finnegan's Wake, it's almost an automatic affinity. You have,
Yeah.
and more common interest, you know, more so than in other common interest groups. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
in those groups, it's like, oh, there's several people here that I'd like to hang out with,
Yeah.
Where anyway.
No, it's fun because I've interviewed 4, 5, 6 people from the New York Wake group, and it was just like I could hear them say one line and go, "Dude, I want to interview you," you know? I mean,
Oh,
it's amazing. It's
yeah,
really been fun.
yeah. I had a really, I don't know if we should end with this, but it was powerful for me. I don't know if it'll translate how well, but I mentioned Navalny before. I saw this movie about him, a week or so ago.
Oh, I saw that movie. That
Yeah,
movie's good.
I mean, that was making me cry. That was
Yeah.
powerful. It was moving
Powerful movie, yeah.
because he was, in an archetypal way, he was the hero. He really
Yeah,
was. I mean, he was a genuine hero. He
genuine.
pursued a purpose that was greater than himself and more important. I mean, he was a true hero.
Totally.
Plus, he loved, it wasn't like he was some miserable guy. He loved his family. He was a fun guy. He was a funny guy. He was like, probably an imperfect human being, but he had that quality of courage as a
Yes.
hero. So it was really, really powerful to me. It just was, for a couple days. It was kind of a moving thing. So I go to this first Finnegan's Wake meeting at the Rosenbach last Sunday, which was a day or two after I'd seen that. And afterwards, there are these two ladies sort of on the sidewalk in front of the building say, "Hey, we're going for a drink. Would anybody like to join us?" So I was new to the class. So I said, "Yeah, I'll join you guys." So we walk over to this bar, and one of the ladies is Russian. And I started to tell her that, that Navalny thing really affected me. And she said, I knew him in Russia. I met him.
Oh my god, wow.
And she said, I went to a rally, and then afterwards I was, he came down and I was speaking to him. And it almost made me cry again because I was like, what are the chances I'm sitting in a bar in downtown Philadelphia with someone from a Finnegan's Wake class, and I had this powerful experience, and they tell me they just met this guy. They met this guy. What
Yeah.
are the chances of that?
How often does that group meet?
It's once a month.
And they do how
Hmm?
much do they do like one page or what?
No, it's not a reading group. It's taught by a lady who was a college professor, and a fairly prominent Joycean. It's a lady named Vicky Mahaffey, and it's more like, in a way, it's not even the greatest class for me because it's a lot of people are coming to Finnegan's Wake for the first time, so there's a lot of
Yeah.
novices in the class. Um,
But it still sounds like you could learn a lot.
Yeah, you can. Well, one of the attractions for me is this teacher who I've really
Yeah.
always valued, and but it's like it's a paid class actually, but they do that. They have Ulysses
Yeah.
groups and Finnegan's, but out of the class, there's a possibility that a Philadelphia Finnegan's Wake readings group might evolve from
Cool.
from the class. But,
Very nice.
yeah.
So two more and we're out of here, Michael. This is
You're infinite. You're all right, but go ahead. A couple more. I might be getting a little spent, but go ahead.
yeah. This is Thornton Wilder, who, if you don't have either, there's like a 2-inch book on all the letters Thornton Wilder wrote about Finnegan's Wake. In 1928, he said, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time."
That's good.
You've laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Um, Well, it's these are hard questions to answer briefly, but it kind of goes with that internal practice. It's like, what is my real role, or what is the real significance of me being here?
Yeah.
Not in some intellectual way, because I don't think that question can be answered intellectually. I think it can only be answered experientially.
Yeah.
So that's my. I mean, this teacher, he says the thing about being human is you are finite, very finite. Obviously, your life has a limit to it, but during that finite time, the infinite exists within you.
Yeah.
The one time where the infinite and the finite are in the same place. And so my goal is figuring out what he means by that fully.
Who was that teacher?
Well,
Was
his name is Prem Rawat. He's an Indian fellow. He has lots of, he's easily accessible online these days if you're interested.
that's really good. I like that.
Yeah, he's that's his big thing, that this is the moment that the infinite and the finite are come together.
Yeah.
Once, so
Beautiful.
you have that opportunity to know the infinite, which is
Beautiful.
so that's my
It's
goal.
beautiful. It reminds me of that Borges short story, The Aleph, where the guy goes under the steps in his basement. He sees the entire world. Or who's the Blake says you see the entire world in the grain of a sand. It's the expansiveness of everything. So, what gives you the most optimism?
That
Yeah.
what I mean, see, there in that is a happiness that's not conditional.
Yeah.
That's in that is an optimism that's not conditional.
Yeah.
So that is what gives me the most happiness, because it's independent of
Yeah.
circumstance. It truly is. Yeah.
Really well. So, Michael, this has been truly enlightening for me. I really appreciate your time and
It's always
energy.
fun to talk to you. It
The
really
first question I asked in part one was, what's the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich said, the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question, what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you. Thank you so much, Michael.
It's always fun talking with you. You have many interests. You're just a very nurturing guy in your presence, and that you're encouraging and you're warm, and at the same time, just so full of nuggets, interesting and great nuggets. So it's a pleasure spending the time with you too.
Thank you, Michael. That means a lot to me, what you just said. I appreciate that. It inspires me. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever.
I hope our paths may intersect in other ways. All right.
Forever and ever. That infinite.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No,
yeah.
The practical thing I was going to say, are these available immediately for people to view? Okay.
As soon as I hit stop here, it's on YouTube under our channel within a few minutes or right away. Yeah.
Can people watch this live if they wanted
They could have watched it live. I usually don't encourage it, because then they start typing in the chat and it distracts a little. But it's okay. It's not restricted. They can go to the channel while I'm doing any of my interviews and watch it live. There's a few people who watch it live. But you know, I appreciate your time. This has really been a light. I mean, we do salons sometime, and maybe we'll do one on a portrait, because it seems as though you know a lot about portrait.
a Zoom
And-
thing, like a Zoom.
yeah, it's like instead of just me and another person, it's like 5 or 6 of us, you know.
Portrait and Ulysses are really my specialties, but yeah.
Great.
Sure. Well, keep me in mind for any Joycean thing that comes up, and I'll keep you in mind. And would
Please
you like that? Any links to that Prem Rawat guy, or
Please send me a link to that, and I want Vicky's email. I want to invite her to be on my podcast.
oh, she's an interesting lady, very sweet.
Or anybody, any of your friends, anybody you know who would be willing to talk for 90 minutes. If you don't want to give me.
What I would do with her, I'm going to see her in about 2 weeks at the next class. So I think I'll mention my experience with you, and I'll ask her if she would like me to give you her contact. Not, you know, I mean, I don't know. She's
I understand.
She's a sweet lady, but anyway, I think it would be a little better if I ask her first, and then.
Please do. Yeah, that would be very kind of you. Thank you. And anybody you know, I can send you the email invite, and you can forward it to them so they don't give their email out. Or you can just say he'll send you an invite, and you can say yes or no to the invite.
Now, do they particularly have to have a Joycean
Nope.
already expertise? They don't.
I do rock and roll, Hollywood, art, normal people, poets, anything. All they have to do is be willing to talk
Be
for
an interesting human being engaging.
No, they don't even have to be interesting. All they have to be is someone who's willing to talk for 90 minutes.
I'll keep that in mind, because if you take the Joycean piece out of it, that opens it up a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Great talking to you, Jerry.
Thanks, Michael. Really fun. That was super.
Great.